Why did you get an ick from your ex? Story 1. First date, I was filling gas and she started going through my phone. I saw her go through it and continued to fill gas as she read my text messages. I'm a fairly open person with little to hide, but I do value trust and honesty. As soon as the pump clicked, she put it back in a hurry. I skipped the dinner plans and dropped her off at home. If I can't even trust you with my phone, I can't trust you with my future. I didn't address it immediately. She didn't know I was driving towards her house until we got super close, at which point we had maybe 2 minutes left together. In a calm and "I'm disappointed in you" tone, I told her I caught her in the act, and this blatant breach of privacy was a deal breaker for me. She's too old to be acting like an insecure teenager. She was 26, and that she should address this behavior before pursuing serious relationships. She knew she was in the wrong. She stayed quiet till we got back and left the car without a word. Still no apology though. When I was working at a hospital, we had a few locum tenens or travel physicians. This one doctor was charming and handsome, but we all got a bit of a creepy vibe from him. There was a young CNA he had said flirty things to before who was sitting charting at the desk and got up to answer a call bell, leaving her phone behind. He sat down at the desk and started snooping through it, within view of the other nurses. He saw he was being watched and quickly put it down, pretending he hadn't done anything. We warned her what happened, and we were all very much on our guard around him after that. I had a similar thing happen, but it was with someone I wasn't even dating. I was joining the army about 5 years back and invited a coworker whom I thought was cute to my going away party. I knew he was single and I was interested in just hearing more about him. I wasn't necessarily looking for a relationship or anything more because I was leaving so soon, but it was nice to have a new friend, honestly. He was helping set up for the party when we took a break. He asked to look at my phone and asked for my password. We had never hung out prior to this. I said fuck it and gave him my password because I wanted to see what he did. My mom called us to help with something in a few minutes, and I got my phone back and went to help. Later on, I looked at my phone and saw that he'd gone through my Snapchat and was telling everyone I know to stop texting me and to fuck off. I stopped talking to him and blocked him on everything. He would send me typed letters while I was in basic about how he couldn't wait to be together, even though I never once insinuated anything more than friends. I never mailed back. Come graduation from BCT, I spoke to my mom in person about the letters, and she said he'd even contacted her about picking me up when I'd fly in from leave. My mom straight up said, hell no, that's my daughter. Within a few months, he was charged with stalking a 16-year-old girl. I never really looked into the details, but something was really wrong with him. But he seemed alright from a distance. He was a high school baseball coach and a volunteer firefighter. Seems a little cliche these days, but he wound up being really messed up. I don't know how some people really have no boundaries. Story 2. She was best friends with another girl who she constantly spoke shit about when said friend wasn't around. Oh, I had an ex who did that. She got super mad at her best friend for wanting to go out for sushi a week before her birthday when she wanted sushi. It was totally on purpose just to steal her idea of getting sushi because you obviously couldn't go out and get sushi 2 weekends in a row. A couple of weeks later, they were best friends again. A couple of weeks after that, and I got ghosted and realized I was better off. I wasn't the sole reason, but this was a large reason why I got out of the most toxic relationship I've ever been in. She constantly complained and talked shit about all of the closest people in her life. Parents, best friends, AA sponsor, and coworkers. Eventually, this ire started getting directed at our mutual friends and then my friends. It was only a matter of time before that vitriol became directed at me, and sure enough, it did. She did not take the breakup well. Oh boy. Brief, but scariest relationship I've been in. Yikes. Reminds me of my most recent ex, who I learned was secretly best friends with his ex. He had previously said his ex looks went to shit and she got dicked down way too much. Naturally, I didn't think they were still buddies based on how he spoke about her. Come to find out through texts, they talked every single day, and he talked poorly about me to her. Ick, ick, ick. Odds are they're talking about you like that behind your back too. Better to leave at this point. Story 3. Funk House. Stepped into a smell that I can't describe. George Clinton would complain about it. Then, as I was sitting on the couch, I noticed gnats everywhere. Looked over at a window, and there were thousands, living and dead, in the sill. Tried to throw away a soda bottle, and hundreds more swarmed up from the pile of dirty dishes in the sink. That was enough for me. I've always been a bit messy. Like, I'll leave clothes on the floor or a chair when I'm too lazy. But when it gets to the point of food or drink sitting around, filth building up to the point of bugs showing up, I'm just amazed amazed people can live comfortably like that. Anything that spoils or rots should be cleaned up in a decent time frame. Most of the time, the people like that are severely depressed or on drugs, both of which make a person not really give a fuck about their house. I don't know though, because I've seen both at different points in my life, but I never allowed my living space to get dirty, so maybe it just comes down to the individual. Every dirty house I've walked into was either a trap house or owned by a guy who actively wanted to kill himself. I live in a depression pit because I'm severely depressed with ADHD on top of that. And yeah, I don't want my home to be this way. It makes me feel pretty ashamed of myself, and I only allow my closest friend into my house because I'd die of embarrassment if anyone else saw. I've been good about avoiding the worst of it, putting uneaten food in the trash, no standing water in the sink, but everything else is pretty bleh. I'm working on myself, but it's a long process, and I'm extremely fortunate to have access to a therapist to begin with. Been there, done that. Here's my unsolicited advice. Pick one thing to clean up a day, and just do it. Just one thing. A load of dishes, clean the bathroom sink and counter, clear a table, that's it. It's not so much about cleaning the house, it's about showing yourself that you aren't a useless lump. Seriously, work on me. What happens is that when you walk past the clean or tidied spot, even if it's just a tabletop, it's a visual reminder. Despite depression, you did something productive. And you get a little self-validation boost every time you walk past it. In my experience, depression steals momentum. You get so used to not moving that you can't move. So we have to get a little forward momentum going and let that build over time. Story 4. Dated a guy who seemed chill but kept talking about social media and how people and exes were scheming against him. I believed him at first until it got to a point where he thought things like a photo someone put up was an indicator that they were getting him back, when these people were literally just doing normal things and posting normal stuff. I think he was schizophrenic, but it was really unsettling. Months later, he rang me out of the blue to ask me about a link between his ex, myself, and a friend. The link was butterflies, and because of this link, he thought we were conspiring against him. Definitely sounds schizo. I have an old friend who slowly slipped into it around 23 or 25, believed all the stuff he said, just thinking, man, this guy ends up around a lot of drama, only to move in with him and realize that he was batshit. I tried to help, but of course then I was scheming against him, and eventually I feared for my safety and had to move out. The conspiring thoughts linked to schizophrenia made me think of an experience I had 20 years ago and a study that came out around the same time. The study was that consuming certain psychedelic drugs can lead to or maybe be used to treat some forms of schizophrenia. 20 years ago, I attended a festival, and on night 1, we got some magic mushrooms. We consumed them because we didn't really get the high we were told we'd get. So we went to see the guy who provided us with the shrooms and told him neither of us got a big high. So he dug out another batch and said, we'll get one with these. Boy, did we. Too much. After what was maybe 45 minutes, I told my buddy I was too high and wanted to call it a night and just sit alone in the car until it wears off. He was high too, but he didn't want to let me go back, and neither did our friends. This is what triggered my thoughts of people conspiring against me. It was insane, the thoughts I had. It involved everyone in my life. Totally whack. There were a series of things my buddy's friends were doing that was helping me just try to chill, i.e. walking near me and yelling a bunch of stuff just to screw with me. Again, I am lucky enough to have the wires in my brain to know that whatever I consumed skewed what was going on, but the conspiracy thoughts remained there. My buddies and I talked a few times about that night, but I usually just tell them I consumed some shrooms that night and it screwed me up too much. That festival was the first and last time I did shrooms. I can't even begin to imagine how shrooms would affect something like schizophrenia. Story 5. I went on a date with a seemingly nice guy in my early 20s. It went well, so after dinner we cuddled in the back seat of his car in a quiet country area listening to music. He gently played with my hair and fingers and gave me a little massage, so relaxing. When he got to my wrist, he looked at it, flipped it around a few times, and said in a lustful voice, "It would be so easy to break this little..." And if you're wondering about what happened after, it was maybe 2007? I don't remember in detail what happened next. I kind of just played it off like, "Tee-hee, you're so strong," until he took me home. Kind of tried to de-escalate, so didn't acknowledge that statement too much. Just kept the conversation moving to something else and was careful to not embarrass or upset him. I didn't keep seeing him. I was busy for the next dates he asked me on, then acted as boring as possible until he lost interest in me eventually. We went to college together and were in ROTC together, so avoiding was kind of hard. He started a relationship with someone else pretty quickly after that. I experienced something something like this too. Not on a first date, but more so I was getting to know someone who remarked to me several times how he was much stronger than me and could kill me. Guys, if you're reading this, it's cool that you're strong, but also I'm strong enough to hurt you is not a turn on and never will be, except in a kink context. I'm strong enough to hurt you, but see, I'm not gonna do it. I'm so nice and good is not the compliment you think it is. I had something similar happen. I was out with a guy and we were sitting on the edge of a bridge over a river, and he just casually said that he could just give me a little push and no one would ever know. I just laughed it off, but I stopped seeing him not too long after that. Fast forward about 20 years or so, I decided to Google him and found out that while he was in prison for rape and attempted murder, and literally hours before Googling him, he had killed a prison guard. I was in shock and I felt sick all over again. He's never getting out of prison. All these guys are potential serial killers. Story 6. Maybe not instantly killed, but a really lovely woman telling me in a sincere voice that she loved me 3 to 4 hours after meeting her. Freaked me the fuck out in a way that I guess could reasonably be described as the ick. In no way was the statement couched either. Just straight up, I love you. I think I responded, no you don't. I dropped the L-bomb on our second date. She replied, oh, thanks. She was the first woman I didn't repulse, and I think at the time, immature me thought it was true. I used to joke about it and hold it over her head years ago, but as time went by, my attitude changed. I now say she should have run for the hills or called me out and asked what she was talking about, because obviously I didn't know what it meant. 38 years and counting, she still puts up with me. I had a brief thing with a guy who told me he loved me twice after knowing him for less than a week. It was so weird. He got upset because he cleared his schedule for me and I didn't come back to his place at the end of the night. First, I never wanted or expected him to do that. Second, I hadn't made any plans with him at all. He just happened to see me at a bar and expected that I would return with him. Every interaction with him up until that point was a little weird anyway. But then that just sent me right over into, no, not at all. He sent me this weird drunken rant and I waited until the next day to respond, telling him that he was being too much and I didn't want to keep seeing him. This was, I don't know, 10 months ago? I guess he had since forgotten about that and has tried rekindling, to which I've shut that down. I've warned multiple other women about this guy too. Apparently he is a pretty well-known creep who does this to women. This is such a Ted Mosby thing to do. Story 7. Went on a date with a guy I met at a party. He made me prove that I liked Lord of the Rings by answering who said what when he quoted someone. He pulled out a notebook of really poorly drawn anime characters and asked me if he could draw me. He was a lot shorter than me and asked if it bothered me. I said no. Then he said, good, I like Amazonian goddesses. He kept trying to put his jewelry onto me despite my protests. He asked what I wanted to order for food, then ignored me and ordered something else, and got frustrated. I didn't eat at all. He referenced being arrested, made me guess what for, and when I refused to guess for not knowing him well enough, he said, GBH. He was a trainee doctor and asked if I'd ever broken any bones. When I replied yes, he said that he was going to look up my x-rays, and the icing on the cake, when I wanted to leave, he got my knee-high boots, slipped them onto my feet, and zipped them up and said, you should always be treated like a goddess. My Morticia Adams. All in one date. And to top it all off, when I did get to him, he said, do you want some slides to wear? I replied, no thanks, and he went, no, you'll need them. And the fear in my stomach arose. What? Why am I going to need them? His intonation was strong on the word need. Well, I sure found out when I stepped into the bathroom to call my friend to get them to come rescue me. I walked in and a dank smell permeated the air. I soon realized it was from the peachy pink bath mat on the floor. This bath mat was once meant to be cream. It squelched underfoot as I flushed the toilet, causing water and stink to flood out everywhere. I had a date like this. We had Tinder conversations earlier and I agreed to go to his apartment to drive to lunch. Big mistake. When I got there, he was wearing colored contacts. Then, since I said I also like Overwatch, that I needed to prove myself before lunch. I said no, I was very hungry and we could play later. He was visibly upset. At lunch, he judged me for getting a steak salad. What's the point? He said. Then he asked me about my favorite movies. I told him, and his responses were, some of those aren't even top 50 movies. Like, I thought you wanted my favorites, not IMDb's favorites. Got back to his apartment, and he was visibly angry. I didn't want to go in and just wanted to head to my car. There was more to the date, but it was almost 10 years ago, so I've squandered the memory. When I told him I wasn't interested in a second date, he blew up my phone about how much of a piece of shit I was and was doing nothing with my life. Spoke about how he was going to be a lawyer and make moves. Doubt it, buddy, but have fun. Don't let all of your nerds out on one date. Story 8. Yeah, I went on a date with a girl who seemed perfectly fine. She was really nice and made an interesting conversation, clearly cared, and put the effort in the date. But then halfway through, she gets a call on her Bluetooth headset, which I hadn't even noticed beneath her hair. I don't know why, but it turned me off so quickly. It was a coworker calling too, and she started discussing some clearly stressful topic, planning a meeting or something. They got to near arguing, and she kept rolling her eyes and sort of half winking at me every time the coworker said something that annoyed her. She ended up saying she had just seen a car crash and she had to run, which weirdly got me back into her a bit since that's a slick move, but then immediately called another coworker to complain about the first one and kept winking at me. This was all on a Saturday morning, by the way, one of the weirdest dates I've ever been on. Not a date, but when I worked in retail, a man in a suit came in to buy light bulbs, and while I was helping him, he kept putting his finger up to silence me and talking to someone on his Bluetooth. After about the third time, I genuinely couldn't tell whom he was talking to, and this MF had the nerve to get mad at me when I didn't immediately respond to a question. A similar thing happened to me. This girl had asked me for a date previously, and I was busy at the time, so she asked me again while I was talking about my favorite bakery. I thought that it would be nice to go to my favorite place on a nice short date. We agreed, and she told me to pick her up after work from her workplace. I arrived on time, and she tells me she'd be down in 10 minutes. No big deal. I wait and she comes. We reach the bakery, and I ask her what she would like to have, then go to the counter and order it. I come back to see her with her laptop out and she's typing something. I ask if anything's wrong, and she says it's an urgent email and she has to send it to a client right now. Our order comes and she's still not done yet. I keep trying to talk about something and she just gives a delayed while eating the cake and paying attention to the laptop. 10 minutes later, she finally closed the laptop to my relief and proceeded to say, "You look like a gangster or hoodlum from the west side of the city," within a few minutes of talking. I'm taken aback by this weird remark, but I think maybe she just meant that I look rough or something as a compliment. She said in our native language. Then she kept telling me stories about how she loved sneaking out of her parents' house at night and how her exes would come pick her up during her college days. Maybe she was hinting at me doing the same. I'm really weirded out at this point and just want it to be over. We finished talking and I dropped her off at home. Came home to see her text and never replied to her again. Better off without her. Story 9. My brief girlfriend bought me some hair care products before she came over because it was right by her house. In return, I said I would go grocery shopping and make her a nice dinner. I thought this to be an even exchange. That night, I found her looking through my trash for the receipt for the groceries to make sure that the $30 she spent on me was equal to the amount I spent on her dinner. I spent years trying to get along with someone on the opposite end of the political spectrum. She'd bash liberals all the time, complaining about social entitlements. I'm a disabled veteran, how liberals want a free lunch, etc., and I'd do my best to ignore it. But I'd buy her a birthday present, and when my birthday came around, it would be like she looked up whatever I bought her online, and my gift would be worth 1/3 of what I paid for hers, to the penny. Or a gift someone gave her that she didn't like or want, so that became my gift, like a Christmas-themed coffee mug in July. I had a coupon that offered a steep discount for meals at a chain restaurant near where I lived, so I invited her to lunch a week out, so she'd have time to prepare. She showed up with her kid as well as her friends' kids and dumped the bill on me. She chose the date and specifically arranged for me to buy her kid, and her friends' kids lunch. Done and done. My ex's family would keep tabs on themselves and charge the full amount for things. Like my ex was living with her mom because she was unmarried and God forbid she rented instead of buying a house, so she paid for expenses. She paid like 10% of her salary and it increased with each raise. If her mom bought her something unsolicited, she needed to pay the full amount. Same if she bought something for her mom, they would do like a balance and pay themselves out. They really kept tabs on themselves. They knew exactly how much each of them owed each other. It was like an exchange market before Sunday lunch. I'm really bad with money, so that whole ordeal had always had me dying of anxiety. Glad that I flew away from that family. I used to see a woman who could never tell me she bought something without telling me the price she paid. This was not bragging, it was the way her parents talked too. I went to McDonald's and got a hamburger for $2 and a Coke for $1.10. The French fries were $1.75. I thought I would get a sundae too, but they had gone up in the price from $1 to $1.25. So I thought about it and then decided to go ahead because I got a 75-cent raise at work 2 weeks ago. She should have been an accountant. This was not what made us go our separate ways. It was the $4 she kept pointing out I was paying for a 6-pack of beer every day. He buys a 6-pack of beer every day? Sounds like she's the one who dodged a bullet. Story 10. She started trauma dumping on me, and after telling her multiple times that I wasn't comfortable talking about this in an extremely public place with kids around, she just kept going. She went into stuff in extreme detail too, showing me pictures and stuff. When I mentioned getting therapy, she said that she didn't want to change. Hard pass. Same. Like, we met in a bar and got talking, we were just a little bit drunk, and we got kind of flirty. I thought everything was going just fine. And then, without changing the flirty tone, she just started talking about how, when she was 11, her dad would get her drunk and, well, do a whole bunch of fucked up shit. Keep in mind that this was the first time we ever spoke in person, and her body language and tone were still flirty as hell, and it just kept getting worse. I couldn't come up with anything to say, and she just kept describing the most fucked up shit people had done to her. Like, not just sexual assault shit, but still a whole lot of that, until I excused myself and left. She seemed kinda confused and angry that I was leaving, called me a bunch of names, among them dickless, spoken with the most venom I've heard in anyone's voice in my life. Kept coming back to that conversation in my mind for months. Like, did she think that was flirting? Were there guys out there who responded to that kind of shit? Or did I just completely misunderstand her intentions? Was that just what she sounded like when she was kinda drunk? Was she crazy? Or was I in fact completely delusional? Was she just fucking with me? Had I made a poor impression and maybe she just wanted me to be the one who left? One of the weirdest hours in my life. Still kinda worry about that shit happening again whenever I meet someone new. I had something similar happen. It was about 8 weeks of dating, but we saw each other at least 5 days a week. She had an abusive uncle that her parents defended and chose to shame her when she pleaded her case. She refused to go to therapy because her parents were both psychologists, so she used her partners for trauma dumping. I started to become visibly upset and tearing up at some of the stories. She proceeded to call me a bitch and that she was stronger than me because she can process on her own. I stopped seeing her the next day. An identical thing happened to me, and I really wish I had been better about identifying that as a huge red flag. The relationship lasted for 5 years, and she eventually pulled away from me because the trauma never got addressed and refused to seek therapy. I'd ask her if I had done something wrong, if she seemed upset, and would bring up something from years ago I did that I had immediately and sincerely apologized for. She lacked the ability to forgive anyone for anything, no matter how big or small, because she had a lot of abuse and trauma throughout her life. Took me way too long to realize that is not something okay to saddle a partner with. Being trauma dumped on someone you barely know is just one of the most uncomfortable experiences anyone can go through. Story 11. I went on a date with a guy who loved showing how wealthy he was. We went to a carnival and he was pulling cash out of the ATM as I stood away somewhere close by. He psst me over and was like, "Check it out." He had a whole $4,000 in his account. Then later in the day, he showed me a text message between him and his mother where he was bragging about me being a fat, and his mom was like, "Get it." Like, WTF. I noped out. He would message me constantly after that. Weird dude. I dated a girl whose family and friends were very materialistic. Her dad had money. They would ask about why I didn't like designer clothes, expensive cars, etc. if I supposedly had a good job. Surprisingly, her dad was really cool and he understood my lifestyle. Her friends and sisters all clearly spent above their earnings and had tons of bad debt. She had told me privately that she tried to explain to them that I wasn't into material goods because I traveled a lot and enjoyed being outdoors, but that I actually made more than they did. But I just told her I didn't give a fuck what any of them thought and to tell them to ask me directly because my finances were none of their business. It ended after we were out for drinks one night with her sisters and friends, and they were all discussing how they only had like $40 for the week to spend on drinks or some shit. I was a pretty heavy partier back then, so I spent a lot at bars and on trips, and was also pretty generous about paying for others to party with me, so I always budgeted excessively for those expenses. They began pooling their money together and asked if I wanted to pitch in for pictures, and one of the dickbags that dated a sister made a comment about not wanting to pay for me if I couldn't match their amount or some shit. At first, I got pissed off, but I told them no thanks because I already had a tab for me and my girlfriend running. Then proceeded to call a friend couple to join us since I felt like the third wheel, and we partied while they sulked over their bullshit spending budget. It was probably one of the only times I acted like money mattered. The next day, she chastised me for being a dick to her friends and family, and I just looked at her and said they were the shallowest and shittiest group of people I have ever met, and that I was fine if we broke up. This is usually a sign he grew up poor. Story 12. In college, I was seeing a girl who lived in a student residence with me, but on another floor. She would always talk about how another guy, Tom, on her floor was obsessed with her and would show me texts between them. She said she only talked to him because he's harmless and that they're friends. I never met him. After a week, her ex-friend from high school pulled me aside and told me not to trust her. She said that the girl I was seeing was a notorious liar and that Tom didn't exist, that she added her own number in her phone as Tom and would text herself and then delete the sent messages. The only reason her ex-friend knew is because she saw the text message exchange happen in the reflection of a mirror when they were in the same room. I was close to the front desk and asked if they could look up the names from that floor. They said yes and told me that there was no guy named Tom on her floor. I noped out of that real quick. The pull aside is not always 100% accurate though. One friend said that to keep a girlfriend of mine and me apart, to which was utter bullshit. Said friend wanted to keep me latched to her male harem and deny her friend of any relations. Nope, girlfriend is awesome, and while not dating now, have been friends for 20 years while our friend married and cut off contact. People are people. Figure out individual situations. Story 13. She started to set up the relationship in a way that made me her emotional punching bag, to where I was to blame for any bad feelings she had. Nothing I could do or say in those moments could ever help the situation because that wasn't my purpose in her life. I was the distraction from her own issues that she refused to acknowledge. Her extreme moods weren't because of her or her past, but it was because I said something the wrong way or laid on the clean sheets with a sweaty body. The ick came about when I realized at 40 years old that this has always been the pattern in my relationships with women, and it has everything to do with how my mom treated me. She had her own massive trauma from being horribly abused as a child, but used that as a shield to use me as her emotional and physical punching bag when she was in a bad mood. "You're not being abused, I was abused," was a line I heard constantly as she beat me on a regular basis. Once I saw that for what it was, and it disgusted me, but it also changed how I handle relationships now, and now I'm happily married for 2 years to a wonderful woman who never does that to me. Imagine all your past relationships hitting you in the face like that. Story 14. I was on a date with a dude where we were double dating with my best friend and her boyfriend. I had to work that night at 11, so around 10 I mentioned I needed to be taken back to my car. He acted all cute, trying to get me to call in and continue the date, and finally I was like, "Seriously, please, I have to get going." Then he got a little mad and said, "Why? You're just a waitress." That has stuck with me ever since. I'm not just anything, and neither were the people at my job waiting for me to arrive so they could go home. There's a nice red OPI nail polish named Not Just a Waitress that I wore often while cocktailing. Had that comment said to me many times by people making half as much in their office jobs. Screw them. The restaurant was and still is my family. We had lots of fun and made good money, and the best part was that when you're done with the shift, you're done. No long-term projects to stress about and no emails to answer to. Miss those days. That's so demeaning. I can't believe he'd say that. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and don't forget to subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again and see you next time.